So it's 03 here, isn't it, for departure?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi guys, how's it going? Just from the FlyMe flight simulator again. So today we're going to be operating a Lisbon to Gibraltar flight, so a nice and interesting one. We'll be taking off a runway 03 from Gibraltar. We're from Lisbon even. We're currently on stand 125, just with the APU running, ready to get pushed back and underway. We'll be cruising at 35,000 feet today, so a bit higher than the last one. That's just due to the increase in distance. Also leads to a better fuel economy, things like that. Yeah, so that's a bit about the route. If Spence wants to have a talk about where it's going to take us, and then we'll get the pre-flight checklist.
Yep. So routing today is from runway 03 via the Gaios 5 November departure, down south to the southwest of Portugal near Faro, left turning inland over Seville, another turn down towards Marbella, drop a few off down there if you like.
Get the beers in.
Get the beers in, and then onto the arrival into Gibraltar today, which should be interesting.
Yeah, so it'll be an interesting arrival into Gibraltar. So there's a few different factors about today's flight. What we're going to have a talk through. We're going to have a talk through things such as the OFP, which is an operating flight plan, what you use. We'll talk through different departures for noise abatement, how we're going to be reducing the thrust on departure. So I don't know if you can remember out of Skiathos, we did a full 26k full chat takeoff. However, today we've got a bit longer of a runway, so we can carry more fuel on the runway, so we can reduce the power on the engines. We'll have a talk through that in the climb to keep things all interesting. So yeah, we'll take the pre-flight checklist then, please.
Oxygen
is tested 100%.
Nav and display switches are normal and auto. Window heats are on. Pressurization mode selector is auto. Isolation valve is open. Flight instruments
are set for departure.
Speed brake
is down D10.
Parking brake
is on.
And engine start levers
cut off.
Pre-flight checklist.
Super. If we take the before start checklist to the line then.
Before start checklist to the line. Fuel, got 6,300 kilos. Crossfeed is closed. Pumps are on.
Coming on now. So we've you leave the fuel pumps off for really as long as possible, as you don't need them on. You only need one on when you're running the APU. However, now we're getting ready to get engine started. It's in the checklist just to get some fuel pumps on, so we can actually start the engines.
Passenger signs are on. MCP
is 139 in the speed, V2, heading 026, altitude 6,000 feet.
Takeoff speeds
is V1 123, VR 125, V2 139, and that's in the MCP.
CDU pre-flight.
It's complete.
Rudder and aileron trim.
Off 3 and 0.
Taxi and takeoff briefing.
Cool, so we'll have a talk through that now. So we do briefings before we go, so we're going to do the taxi and takeoff briefing. We'll first cover the taxi briefing. So we've parked up on stand 125 here in Lisbon. We're going to be facing south from pushback. We'll taxi down to Mike 1, where we actually do cross the runway, so we'll be careful of that, making sure that we actually check that there's nothing on the approach. Even though there won't be, but you've got to really be careful. We'll cross the runway 1735 to Mike 2, follow Mike 2 round to Mike 3, that'll merge onto Mike 4, and we did the performance calculations for November 2 today, which we'll have a talk through in the cruise. And then we'll be lining up on 03 from November 2, if that's all happy on your side, Spence.
Happy with that.
Cool, so the departure we're doing is the Gaios 5 November departure off runway 03. That's one of the standard instrument departures out of Lisbon that you fly. The procedure is climb straight ahead to at or above 2,000 feet. It'll be a right hand turn to Papa Tango 416, which we have in the legs page, then direct to Manor and then to Gaios. So that's the departure. It will be a NEDP2 departure, so That's a noise abatement 2 departure. There's noise abatement 1, noise abatement 2, and we'll have a talk through those in the cruise as well. So acceleration altitude is 1,374 feet when we can begin to accelerate the aircraft and lower the nose, and minimum flat retraction altitude, which Spencer's got set on his side, is 1,528 feet. We've got the Lisbon VOR 114.8 in the nav box, and Lisbon approaches 119.105, airport elevation 374 feet. There's also a lost comms procedure. That sort of does what it says on the tin, lost communications, so that'd be what we'd follow if we had some sort of radio failure, and we can also have a chat about that as well. So that's the taxi and takeoff briefing, so that will be before start checklist below the line then, please.
Start checklist below the line. Flight deck door.
Closed and locked.
Mobile devices.
Off.
Doors and windows.
Closed and locked.
Packs coming on.
Can come off.
Anti-collision light coming on. Transponder is XPNDR.
Checked.
Before start checklist complete.
Super. Cool, so we spoke to the tower, clear push and start. Spoke to the ground there, happy, so we'll get underway. So parking brake's coming off. And this time, compared to Skiathos, we're actually getting pushed back, whereas Skiathos was a self-taxi. Right, if you could start as engine number 2.
Starting to.
So start valves come open, we've got N2 rotation, and start should take about 45 seconds to a minute. At 25% N2, Spencer's going to start adding some fuel to the engine, which is about there. So fuel flow is increasing, oil pressure is increasing, N1's rising, EGT's rising. That's looking like a good start. So we're looking for hot starts, hung starts. Just need to be satisfied that everything's okay, because we don't want to be taking a dodgy engine into the air.
Oh, definitely not.
Right, that's starters cut out. And start engine number 1. So that was about 45 seconds there again. N2 rotation. Start valves open. Just looking for that 25% again. There's 25. Fuel flow is increasing, oil pressure is rising, EGT is rising. EGT just stands for engine gas temp, and the M1's starting to rotate as well. It's looking like it's going to be another good start. Got a very diverse range of aircraft parked up. We've got Turkish Airlines, Korean Air. Lisbon's very popular today.
Yes.
Cool. Start to cut out. And the after start flow, please.
After start flow.
So what we've done there is put the generators on for the electrics. Probe heats can come on. The packs can go to auto, start supplying some air conditioning so people aren't getting too warm. APU's coming off as we don't need that anymore. That's a little engine at the back of the aircraft that you'll hear when you board in. Start switch is continuous. And if you could set takeoff flap, please, Spence. So what Spencer's doing now is setting the flaps on the wings for takeoff, so we get the correct lift, so we actually get off the runway. And before taxi checklist, I'll set the parking brake.
Before taxi checklist, generators are on, probe heat are on, anti-ice is off, not required, packs are auto, isolation valve auto, engine start switches are continuous, recall is checked, auto brake is RTO, engine start levers,
Idle detent.
flight controls.
Do those now. If you just follow me through. Full up, neutral, full down, neutral, full left, neutral, full right, neutral. And all we're doing here is just the rudder, full left, neutral, full right, neutral. All we're doing there is just checking everything feels free and actually moves, so when we do move the controls something happens, and you'll see that just after you push back you'll see all the the ailerons and elevators and the rudders moving. So we're just getting lowered down by the tug now. He's driving off. He can go. He can go and eat his lunch. Ground equipment. We'll just stand by for the pin. Clear on the left.
And clear on the right.
Cool. So
Force tax checklist complete.
Super. So we'll taxi down. It's initially down to Mike 1, so it'll be second right. Let's check. So parking brake's coming off. Config checks. And we're off. So flight time today is just about an hour. Cruising reasonably high at 35,000, which we've pressurised the cabin for in that little window there. And that's so you don't pass out from lack of oxygen at the height. So that's a very important thing to do. So on the taxiways, just need to be cautious of the speed. The runways you can go up to 50 knots. Taxiways are 30 knots. And around corners you don't really want to be going any more than 10 knots. Because cabin crew will be doing their safety briefing, and if you whip it round the corner at more than 10 knots, people are going to end up on the ground. And also being careful on the brakes, not using them too much. Alright, so what we got there, is that Mike 1?
That is Mike 1.
Great, so we'll turn right here, just brake in to get slower than 10 knots. So we're going to check the approach path both sides, so I'm going to check the left when we get past this point. Spencer's going to check the right, just so we don't hit another plane.
Clear on the right.
Checked. Clear on the left.
We are on active runways.
Checked.
Landing lights, turn-offs, taxis, strobes.
So we want to be as visible as possible. If we go transponder to TRA, and if you can bing the cabin. And before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist. Takeoff brief.
Is reviewed.
Centre tank fuel pumps are off, not required. Cabin is secure. Flaps.
Oh, set for departure.
Stabiliser trim.
Is 5.77 units.
And transponder.
It's TRA.
Before takeoff checklist complete.
Checked. So it goes TRA, so we can, once it's in that setting, we can show up as a traffic intruder on other aircraft's TCAS display, which is the traffic collision and avoidance system. We'll have another talk through that actually in the air, about why that's really helpful and how there's been some incidents in the past. And we did performance for November 2, was it?
Yes.
Sound. Take it, that's this one here. That's checked. So we got a nice long runway here at Lisbon. So stop bars off, we've been cleared to take off, so lights are all checked, taxi light can come off now, Spence. Approach path is clear. And I'll take it on the roll. So timers. Take off. Happy?
Happy, yeah.
Slight forward pressure on the controls.
Takeoff for set indications normal. 80 knots.
Check.
V1. Rotate. Positive climb.
Gear up.
Gear up.
LNAV.
400 feet.
Checked. So as you can notice, we've got less of a climb gradient than last time due to that less thrust being used. So we're approaching the acceleration altitude now. And M1 bug up.
1,000 feet, M1 bug up.
And 1. And flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
Then when we get above the 1 bug on the display, that means we can take flaps up. Flaps up.
Flaps up.
So staying at the up speed at the moment, as we don't want to go into turns too fast, because it can increase the range of the turn.
Flaps up, no lights.
It's checked after takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Engine bleeds are on. Packs are auto. Landing gear is up and off. Flaps up, no lights. Altimeters.
And set standard passing flight level 42, climb flight level 60. And I'll take VNAV please.
VNAV engaged.
VNAV speed.
Checked.
So that's going to start to increase speed of the aircraft to a bug speed of 250 knots. And if we can say continue climb now to flight level 350, so if you could set us that in please, Spence. And if you could delete the restriction in the FMC. Cheers. So all Spencer's done there is hit alt into vent, and that'll clear any restrictions we've got. Because if we didn't do that, the aircraft would hold itself at 6,000 feet, or flight level 60 in this case, until we're past that constraint. However, today we'll say we've been cleared straight up to flight level 350, which is 35,000. So could release the cabin, please. All that means is everyone can start getting the food and drinks now. Cabin crew can run all their checks. Some really nice scenery out in Portugal today. So approaching 10,000 feet, if we could do the 10,000 feet checks please.
Okay, lights are down for time.
Great, so VNAV's now above 10,000, it's also bugged 282 knots. So below 10,000 feet, unless you get cleared free speed, you're not allowed to go above 250 knots. But now we've gone above that, VNAV's recognised that, and it can bug that higher speed, which means we can get underway on the flight to Gibraltar faster. Right, so I'm going to go Command A now, which is Autopilot A. Identify it's got command, so now the autopilot's flying the aircraft. And if you could release the passengers please. Great, so that's all good now, we've flown the departure. We're just about to finish it off when we get to Gios. That was our SID, which is the standard instrument departure. We also, alongside that, flew the NADP2, which is a noise abatement 2 procedure. That's the most common noise abatement procedure. There's NADP2 and NADP1. NADP1 just reduces noise for people who live further away from the airfield on the SID. So that procedure is you take off, you climb at V2 plus 10 to 20 knots, and not at a height of less than 800 feet. You bug up, it's usually about 1,000 feet above aerodrome level, so in today's case at 1,374. You bug the speed up, which is when I called M1 bug up, and that's what Spence did. And then when you get to the minimum flat retraction altitude, which Spencer's got set on his side of 1,528 feet, you can start to retract the flaps on schedule and start to get clean configuration of the aircraft and start the acceleration. The NADP1 departure, it's not as common, it's used at certain airfields. So it's M1 bug up again, but this time it's 3,000 feet, and that works better for people who live closer to the airfield. As don't forget, jet aircraft are pretty loud, so got to be cautious of the people for noise pollution and things like that. Also on the departure, this time we used a D-rate on the engines. So out of Skiathos on the first video, which if you haven't watched, feel free to head over and watch that. We used a 26k takeoff, so that means we're getting 26,000 pounds of thrust, which is the full whack out of the engines for the departure. You might think, why don't we do that all the time? It's probably the safest thing to do. It does get you airborne quicker, you accelerate faster. However, if you don't need to, you can do something called a D-rate. You can either do a fixed D-rate, or a D-rate with an assumed temperature. So a fixed D-rate would just be, so we've got 26k, which is full power. You got 24k D-rate, which reduces the power to 24,000 pounds of thrust. Or you got 22k D-rate, which reduces down to, let's guess, 22,000 pounds of thrust. So that'll fix the D-rate down. On top of that, if the runway permits, you can also trick the engines into an assumed temperature, and that'll reduce the thrust even more. So today we used a 22k D-rate with an assumed temp of something like 58 degrees, and that's reduced the thrust, which means we're not using excess power, it's called. So if we use any more than that, we'd be using something called excess power, which we don't need to use because it just increases engine wear. It'd mean they need to go in for checks more often, increases the noise, probably not as comfortable as it's a pretty harsh acceleration and pretty steep climb out. So we don't need it, so there's no point in using it. As fun as it is, there's no point. So we just use that 22k with the assumed temperature today, and that keeps everything happy because we don't have that excess thrust. You also may worry about, like, if we've reduced the thrust, if one engine fails, are we still going to be able to suitably climb away? Yes, it still compensates in for the engine failure procedure. So even with the reduced temperature D-rate, you've still got enough power there in case the engine does fail. It doesn't just do it, so if an engine fails, you're screwed. There is enough power there. So yeah, that's about the NADP1 and NADP2 departures, and also the engine D-rates. The engine does come back anyway once you've taken off, but just on the initial departure. So Spencer's going to have a little talk to you about the flight plan, how that works, and then I'll have a talk to you about the fuel and stuff like that. So I'll hand over to Captain Spence, and we'll go from there.
So what is actually included in the OFP then? It's that contains your planned fuel, trip fuel, contingency fuel, final reserves, block fuel, things like that. And then you've also got a different section for the routing. That tells you the planned route and the expected waypoints. Then you've got operational impacts, which include things like cost and wind associations with the operation. Then you've got weights. That tells you how much passengers you're taking on a flight today. In our case is 85. Then you've got fuel, of course, and takeoff weight, which is estimated, but that is calculated through what's called the OPT, which is used on these EFBs to calculate speeds, and you get that through like the wind data and different factors, which Ollie will surely tell you about later on.
Yeah.
Then we've got yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool, nice one. So Spence mentioned something about fuel. So unlike your car where you just shove a, I don't know, 30 quid in, 30 quid, hope for the best, you have to plan the fuel. That's planned by the ops department for the flight. So as we said, unlike your car where you just shove one set of fuel in, that covers everything. In the flying world, Spence mentioned a few different types. So we've got trip fuel, so that sort of does what it says on the tin. That's the fuel needed to literally get from A to B, so in our case today, Lisbon to Gibraltar. So that covers the takeoff, the climb, the cruise, the descent, the approach, the landing from A to B. However, if we break it down, that's not going to be enough because nothing ever goes that smooth. You've got to counter in things like say you had wind that was giving you a headwind, slowing you down, it's going to increase time, you're going to need more fuel. If there's a thunderstorm, ideally we don't want to fly into that, as I fancy going home, so we don't want to fly into the thunderstorm. So we have to deviate, either simple stuff, you just turn left around it or right around it. It's very rare you can climb above or below the thunderstorms, which I'll have a talk about in a minute. So you'd either go, say we had a thunderstorm in front of us on the navigation display here, around this range, we'd be like, oh no, we've got a thunderstorm ahead. So we'd request either a right or left turn, whichever makes operational sense. So we'd be like, FlyMe 123, request left turn heading 120 to avoid weather. Then all we do is hit heading select 120, and that'll deviate us around the thunderstorm, and then we'll resume our navigation once we get back around it. Once we're back around it, we've added on some distance to the flight there, so obviously that's going to have used more fuel. So that's a key factor in why you can't just use trip fuel for the flight, because you would probably run out of fuel. The next fuel in the category is called contingency fuel. So that's just 5% of the trip fuel added on, or an extra 5 minutes of fuel time added on, just to, as it does for contingency. Next type, we've got alternate fuel. So on the flight plan that Spencer's talked about, we have our alternate airports on the flight plan. So say we was en route to Gibraltar, and a nice fact about Gibraltar is there's that crossing, isn't there, the road, cars, yeah. So it's like a zebra crossing going across the runway. Well, not quite a zebra crossing, but a little crossing going across. So say you're on the approach, and all of a sudden 3 cars broke down on the crossing, and they didn't have enough time to move them. You'd need to go to your alternate. So we've got the alternates on the flight plan. So they're usually company preferred alternates, and you basically say, right, alternate today is, off the top of my head, Malaga.
Malaga, yeah.
So that alternate fuel would get us to Malaga, and that also covers the missed approach at Gibraltar and the arrival into Malaga. Thinking happy days, that's enough fuel? Not quite. There's still some more. So we've got final reserve fuel, which is you're getting into some trouble if you start getting into that. You've had an unlucky day, as it is. If you think you've had to deviate around a thunderstorm, you've had to add on your contingency fuel, you've had to divert to Malaga, which probably wasn't a bad thing, because you get to go out in Marbella the same night. Sorry, 2 to go, vertical speed 2,000 feet a minute. So yeah, you've diverted, you've got to Malaga, you've had to do a missed approach there. So your final reserve, 1,000 to go, VS 1,000. Your final reserve is a minimum of 30 minutes at 1,500 feet above aerodrome level at holding speed. And as soon as you get into that final reserve speed, you will declare a fuel emergency, as you don't really want to run out of fuel in a jet aircraft. So yeah, an emergency would have been declared there, and you'll be priority on air traffic, providing there's no other significant emergencies. So got out of choir there. So yeah, that's all the fuel. So it's not what you think, where you probably just take a fuel that didn't come up to the aircraft for 5 minutes ago and shove in 100 quid's worth of jet fuel. It's really planned out by the department with the winds, the route, the weather, the arrivals, the alternates. So there's a lot of things that really come into that. And we have the ability here with the EFBs that we have to actually do an operational flight plan. So it's great that that's utilised, especially for any airline guys coming in who don't have access to the company iPads at the moment. They can actually use those iPads to do as close to real world procedures as possible. And we've got a captain and first officer one, so we've linked them together with the flight plans, which is a great thing using SimBrief. So yeah, that covers the fuel side of things. We've levelled off. We're at 35,000 feet. We're currently doing Mach 0.737. That's quite ironic, actually. Mach 0.737 in a 737. All that means we're doing 0.737 of the speed of sound. So there's a local speed of sound in the area, and we're doing 0.73, 0.74 about of that, which is an indicated airspeed at 35,000 feet of about 249 knots currently. ground speed of 425 knots, and a true airspeed of 425. That's because we've got no current wind actually set up in the cruise. Been going 15 minutes, so as you notice, the 737 does climb like a rocket. It's a pretty fast aircraft on the climb rates. Don't like to exceed it too much, but we were probably getting about 4,000 feet a minute on the departure. But it's not as steep as people think. So if you imagine a protractor, you got 90 degrees at the top. There's flat 0 degrees. You're only climbing up at about 20 degrees, so it's not too steep. But we're up now. We're level. We've currently got 2.5 degrees pitch and 80.5% on the engine power, and that keeps us happy and flying. So what we do now to keep things busy is, if you're happy, Spencer, we'll have a talk through the nice and interesting approach into Gibraltar.
Yep, have to do it.
So if you could get up the RNAV runway 09 approach and let me know when you've got that. So we're just going to do another brief here for the arrival. Good. So we've got the RNAV runway 09 at Gibraltar. It's final approach course of 089. So if you want to set that your side, I'll just reset the heading. .089 set. Minimums, we got 1500 on the barrow, so we'll set that as well. So it's a nice high minimum today, just because of the type of approach, and what you'll see when we talk about it, you'll probably realise why. And also there's a big rock, so you need to be cautious of that. Great. So we got minimum set. That's for, sorry, that was my mistake there. That's for the that's the platform altitude. So we'll reset that. Minimums are actually 374 feet. And that's exactly why we brief, just to cover that, and that mitigates the risk of mistakes being made. So we've done that, and we can reset that minimum now to 374 feet. And the next thing we'll talk about is the elevation of the airport. It's quite a comfortable armrest up here, actually. I'm getting there. And the minimums just mean we have to be visual with some sort of runway or lights on the runway before that altitude or at that altitude. If not, we have to carry out a missed approach go around, and that's just another safety thing, because we don't want to go below that, because it could actually risk getting into some serious troubles. So got minimum set. Airport elevation is 12 feet, so we'll set 50 up there. Altimeter settings in hectopascals. Runway elevation 0 hectopascals. Transition level is by ATC, and transition altitude 6,000 feet. For the approach wise, be routing to PMOS. We want to be at flight level 90, unless ATC clearance for lower flight level obtained, and a maximum of 240 knots. We'll make sure to configure early with the type of the approach, and we just want to, once again, like we said on the last stream, stay ahead of the aircraft by a few steps. So flight level 90, unless cleared lower by air traffic, max 240 knots. Then from PMOS, it will route us on 258 degrees to Bughoff. If we have a look at this in the FMC as well, to Bughoff, then to Golf Bravo 092, that's the initial fix. I'll plan to be at least gear down flat 15 for there, as this cuts us in really tight. Then it's to Golf Bravo 094, Golf Bravo 09 Foxtrot, which is a max 160 knots. Then Golf Bravo 096, and its final approach course, as we said, of 089 degrees. That cuts us in. So with this approach, guys, it's not like an ILS where we've got the guidance. We can use VNAV down, but this actually cuts us in on about a 3 mile final. So usually, sometimes you could start on a final of even, what would you say, Spencer? Could even come out 20 nautical miles. Whereas this one really cuts us in. It's a constant turn in. So when we're visual, I'll go flight directors off, manual thrust, manual flight, and actually visually fly the procedure, making sure to stay away from that rock.
Yeah,
it's best not to fly near that in a plane. You're best off doing a little hike up there or something. So yeah, we've got that. Platform altitude 1500 feet. Minimums are set for the 374 of the decision altitude. And that's all good. We've got PAPIs, missed approach altitude, and missed approach procedure. So the missed approach procedure will be climb to 4,000 feet. Follow the final approach track to runway 09, so 089 degrees. Direct to Golf Bravo Mike 02. QOX and PMOS max 230 knots, and at PMOS turn right max 230 knots to up, and then enter the holding at 4,000 feet, and then we can decide what we want to do, why the missed approach happened, what happened, and what we're going to do on the next approach, and brief that again. MSA for our sector will be 6,800 initially, and then we'll turn to 2,500, and then the final MSA is 3,900, and that's for the Gibraltar MSA. Frequency wise, the Golf Bravo Golf Bravo Romeo Gibraltar is 113.6. If you want to, happy to transfer that over.
Happy to transfer.
And we got VOR1, and that's identified on 111 miles on the DME, nautical miles away. It's a 3-degree glide slope, so upon intercepting that final turn, we'll bug the aircraft down to minimum in the altitude window to 400 feet, initially go vertical speed. So to work out your descent rate on a 3-degree glide slope, little calculation of the day, calculation of the stream, you multiply your ground speed by 5. So let's make it nice and easy. Say you had 100 knot ground speed, you need to multiply it by 5 to get your 3-degree glide slope. So if you want to get your pens and papers out, do that now, see what you get for an answer, and then we'll decide. So once you've done that, you should get minus 500 feet per minute on the descent rate, and that will maintain that 3-degree glide slope, so your 2 reds, 2 whites on the PAPIs, and your stable approach criteria coming down. So there's your little bit of maths for the day.
Countdown style.
Yeah, countdown style. Next time we'll do the 60 seconds. But yeah, that's all you do. So in our case today, we'll probably have about a final approach ground speed of approach reference. We'll take auto brake 3. So
yes, I'm happy to.
Gibraltar is actually another really short runway, like Skiathos. It's only a few hundred feet more, I think. We'll go flap 30, 135, plus 5 for the wind correction. So all you'd do to work out your ground speed there would be, depends on the wind, but you could start to have a think about it before. There's nothing wrong in doing that. Just don't get an exact figure in your head, because you don't want to get some confirmation bias going on. You need to really stick to what it is at the time. So we're 100 miles away from the Gibraltar VOR, and we're currently 8.3 miles away from our next waypoint, which is Anuba. Never make them easy to pronounce.
No.
Do you want to have a talk about a TCAS?
TCAS, yeah.
Yeah, have a little chat.
So TCAS then is is basically a traffic advisory system that in the 73s and the Airbus, majority of the airliners have installed, which is for when you look on these displays here, and it also gives you an oral warning for if you've got traffic inbound. So if we're flying now as we are, and we get a message that pops up and there's another aircraft head on, it'll either advise us to descend or climb, depending on how fast they're approach.
No traffic lights in the air.
No traffic lights in the air, no.
So yeah, we get some little, exactly what Spence said, you get some little aircraft symbols appear. So TCAS works, it sends off signals to the other TCAS in the other aircraft, and sends them back. So might have aircraft floating about, it'll tell us how high or low they are in relation to us. So we're at flight level 350 now, so if there was an aircraft at flight level 360, it'll just say plus 100, or plus 1. 0, and that'll just tell us how high it is. If it gets within a certain range, initially we'll get a traffic advisory. So we'll get a traffic, the aircraft symbol on the navigation display of the intruding aircraft, what it's called, would turn a different colour, turn amber or yellow,
red,
something. Yeah. We get traffic, we notify ourselves of that, so we confirm that traffic TCAS, I or you have control. We don't do anything until it gives us a resolution advisory, which is the next stage. So your day's getting really bad now. Resolution advisory, which is an RA, the aircraft symbol, the intruding aircraft symbol would turn red. We get an instruction saying climb, or descend. And at the exact same time in the other aircraft, they'd also get a climb or descend. So say the other aircraft got a climb, we're going to get obviously a descend. We'd follow, it'd be autopilot off, manual flight. We'd follow the TCAS directors down and ensure that we're in a suitable range of VS, vertical speed down, and we've got a suitable descent rate coming down, because obviously we don't want to hit the other plane, and we'd also monitor that the other aircraft's climbing. First thing the pilot monitoring would do, or one of the first things, they'd come over the radio and just go, for example, FlyMe 123 TCAS RA. That'd acknowledge air traffic that we're in a TCAS resolution advisory state, and not to make any conflicting information, which we'll talk about in a minute. Next thing we'll hope to hear is a clear of conflict. That does what it says on the tin, clear of conflict. And then we could just notify air traffic and say, FlyMe 123, clear of conflict, resume in flight level 350. So you need to be very careful to actually stick to the manoeuvre and ensure that both aircraft are climbing and one's descending. So there was a instance, I don't know if you know about it, Spencer, with that DHL 757 and that Russian Bashkirian charter, where they actually did collide, and that was because of conflicting information from ATC. So the controller was working 2 stations at the time, because the other air traffic guy was on rest. So he was monitoring a whole of Zurich airspace, upper airspace at that time. So he's monitoring quite a lot of aircraft. The DHL aircraft requested to climb to flight level 350. The Russian aircraft was also at 350. The controller cleared that. They ended up being put on a collision course. The controller went away for a bit, did his other screen. He was actually bringing an Airbus in, I believe, to Friedrichshafen or something. Then what happened was he come back, noticed the collision course, told the Bashkirian charter to descend down to 34,000 feet or whatever it was. No, they were both at 36, and he cleared the Bashkirian down to 35. He just said basically descend flight level 350 expedite, got crossing traffic. They did that, but at that time happened, they both got a TCAS, but unfortunately the DHL got a TCAS descent whilst the Russian plane was still descending, but the Russian aircraft got a TCAS climb, but they stuck to the air traffic's descent. They should have actually climbed, but it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they both ended up continuing on the collision course down, and the one final piece of the recipe that absolutely made it a disaster was the air traffic controller advised the Russian aircraft that it was right 2 o'clock position to look out for it, when it was actually left 10 o'clock. So they didn't see it till the last minute, and unfortunately there was a collision. But we learned from things. We've got really safe procedures now, so there's thorough training involved in terms of TCAS, and why basically as soon as the TCAS RA, the air traffic controller just leaves the pilots to it. So that's TCAS. It's a really clever system, and it's important in something called RVSM airspace, which is reduced vertical separation minima airspace. Off the top of my head, I think, is it 27,000 or 28,000 feet it starts?
One of the two.
One of the two, and that's when autopilot becomes mandatory. So above that altitude, you need to shove the autopilot in. That's because with the reduced vertical separation minima, there's only 1,000 feet separation between aircraft. So that's means they're passing actually pretty close, aren't they? 1,000 feet. So that's why you might be more prone to a TCAS. But everyone's on their own airway, their own route, and that's why you need to be careful in emergency descents. Because if you descend down, you might descend down onto converging traffic. So what you actually do is emergency descent. You'll come off, I think it's 45 degrees left or right of your track whilst descending, and that means you're not going to conflict with any other traffic. So yeah, we'll shortly actually be starting a descent. So how time flies, pardon the pun. So yeah, we'll be shortly starting the descent into Gibraltar. We'll try and actually do a good approach. We'll compete with a guy called Airbus Red. So Airbus Red, he actually suggested this route for us, the Gibraltar route. He's an Airbus A320 captain for a UK-based airline. He's done this many times, so we'll try and get up to his standards. But yeah, he recommended this route, so we're going to hopefully do a good job. And I'm quite glad that someone chose this route, as we've never done this before. We had a little practice.
So it'll be interesting for us.
Yeah, like the Sully movie when they said they had like 34 attempts or whatever it was.
We only had one.
Yeah, so we've had one attempt, so we'll try not to disappoint. So yeah, just passing over the Seville actually.
Seville.
Can't see too much out the window as we're quite high up, but it's all modelled actually really nice. And we'll get ready to start a descent. So we'll set 9,000 feet if you're happy with that.
Happy with that.
So I'm just going to pre-select 9,000 feet in the altitude window. And we'll have a look how far we are away.
About 40 miles.
Yeah. Exactly. So all Spencer's done there. Did you just use the range rings then? Just to... Yeah.
And the FMC there.
Perfect. So there's multiple pages you can use in the FMC. Spencer's got currently the descent page. If you want to have a talk through about what's on there, if you want, Spencer.
So in your descent page on the FMC, you've got things such as your speed restrictions, your target speed, and at the minute we're currently 249 knots-ish, or in Mach number that's 741. And then it tells you how long you've got till top of descent. So in our case here is 10 miles-ish.
I'm going to start the descent now actually, so we'll go alt interval.
Happy with that? And I'm just going to put a speed restriction, 250/1.
Checked.
And that's the standard speed restriction across the world, 250 below 10,000.
So it's always good to monitor the thrust levers in the 737. Sometimes we might move about a bit and not where you want them to go. And we've also got the VNAV profile. We're a bit low at the moment, but that'll come back in. We've just done that so we're not having to do necessarily a steep descent. So as you can notice, it's quite shallow. And we've got 32 miles to the next waypoint. Briefly approach. We'll have a quick talk through on the taxi actually. We didn't quite cover that, did we? So we'll get the Gibraltar plate up again. Destination LXGB. Taxi. Airport parking. So we're landing on runway 09. If you just let us know when you got that.
Yep, 09.
Landing on 09. And I'll probably, with the shortness of the runway, we'll aim to vacate at Echo, as we don't really want to be warming the brakes unnecessarily. So vacate at Echo, be a left-hand turn, then another left, and we'll park on the civil apron. That's nice and simple.
Yeah.
So compared to a lot of airports, so Heathrow or something like that, for example, you've got a lot more to brief than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, land 09, we've got 5,833 feet, left turn onto Echo, left turn, and then onto the civil apron. Nice quick one. We'll have a read through the notes. There's nothing really significant on there. We've got one warning, so we've got heavy bird activity and wind turbulence, so we'll keep an eye out for some birds and the wind turbulence. and you need to be really careful with that on an approach like this, because as we mentioned earlier, it's a pretty interesting approach. Right, if you're happy, Spencer, I'm going to route us direct to PMOS.
Yep.
That's the initial fix, so I'll execute that. And I'm going to whack out a speed brake just to get us back on that profile. And got noted on the navigation display 9000 alpha, which is set. Have to play so you can spot the rock first.
Yeah.
So VNAV's booked 265 knots as well. And we've got 65 miles until PMOS, just sending out at 30,000 feet. And we'll go seatbelt signs on and smoking on. Sound as a pound. So unfortunately now, if you need a wee in the cabin, you've got to wait.
Computer says no.
Computer says no, yeah. Spencer says no. Right, so we've got 4,000 feet-ish a minute descent down. That's just recapturing the profile, it's coming back in. Starting to hit some cloud as well. So yeah, one thing I forgot to mention about the thunderstorms is the reason it's difficult to climb above or below them is because of how high and low they go. So some of the major CBs, the cumulonimbus clouds, which we're most, I wouldn't say fearful, but most cautioned of in aviation, is a cumulonimbus cloud. So they can develop severe turbulence, severe icing, severe up and down drafts of upwards of 5,000 feet a minute up and down. So you do get thrown about a bit, and it could cause some serious structural damage to the aircraft, possibly even lead to a crash, just because of the intensity of power they've got. So they do stretch upwards to up to 50,000 feet, and they could be low as well. So when you're at 35,000 feet, you can't climb above. Unless you're in Concorde, you're not really going to get above one. You couldn't take a 737 up to 50,000 feet. What is it? I forgot the ceiling. Is it about 40,000? 40,000-ish, something like that. And also you need to be cautious of other things like oxygen. So above those heights, oxygen needs to be supplied by pressurized oxygen, 100% oxygen as well, or she can develop hypoxia. In any pressurised aircraft, that's why we pressurise the aircraft. Like we had a little joke on the ground about the pressurisation. That's why you pressurise the aircraft, so you don't get hypoxia, which is basically a lack of oxygen, which would mean you're insufficient to perform tasks, lack of concentration. There's quite a lot of symptoms that come with it, euphoria. And once you've got it, you need to be very careful because it develops quite insidiously, but that's why in case of a decompression you've got the rubber jungle, which is up there, passenger oxygen. So part of the emergency descent, the first thing the pilots will do is don your oxygen mask, establish communication, and then do the emergency descent, because the key is to get the oxygen, because that's what's keeping you alive. And when you get upwards of 40,000 feet, your time of useful consciousness can be 10 to 15 seconds. I think at about 35,000 feet it's about 30 to 90 seconds. That's why they always say do your own mask before you do anyone else's. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you've just got to do your own first, because you can look after other people once you've got your own done. Nervous for the approach? No.
Pretty happy with everything.
Never. Right, so we've got 265 knots. Thrusted idle. Everything looks good.
Yeah, speed looks good. Profile's good.
Have a look through some of the systems. So N2 looks good, oil pressure looks good, fuel flow looks good, oil temp looks good, quantity, vibration, auto brake set. You can also look at how much fuel we're using, how much we have used. just gives us a good idea of situation awareness. And you'd also check that along with the OFP, wouldn't you, how much fuel you're actually using compared to where you are, and if it's making sense and looks good, because last thing you actually want is running out of fuel. I know what we talked about earlier, guys, about the fuel and how much you do carry, but you still need to keep an eye on it. You can also see how much work the autopilot does as well. It's quite a good system. So we're currently operating VNav and LNav on the way down, and that keeps us nice and on profile. And we're just passing below the tops of those clouds. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? I'm just looking for Gibraltar. Should be somewhere in that direction. Also, if you've got flight sim at home, have a go in at doing this on that. See what we're doing and see if you can replicate it. Or even better, come and have a go here. May as well. Good fun. And let us know how you do it at home if you don't crash it into the rock. And any other route suggestions, feel free to add them in. So Gibraltar, as we said, we had a good suggestion. It's up to you. We don't mind doing even ones like East Midlands to Dublin, things like that. But the more interesting the approach, I think it's quite fun. It's especially from a viewing point of view. Like today, it's really interesting. It should look quite good as well. If we don't mess it up.
We'll try our best.
So we're 27 miles away from PMOS. Which we need to be at 9,000 feet by, and we're on profile. And speed wise, we mentioned 240 knots, didn't we? Just get that up. Yeah, 240 knots. So we'll start reducing shortly. We'll take manual control of the speed, we'll go speed intervene. So just like we have alt intervene, we've also got speed intervene. And that does what it says on the tin, we can manually alter the speed. You see anything like Gibraltar out your window?
Nothing yet.
If you can spot it from home or wherever you are, let us know. Can't see it yet. So let's have a look. It's looking good to me. We're going 43 minutes so far. Anything you'd like to add for the approach?
Nothing that we've already covered.
Super. That's what we want to hear. So that's big on why you review stuff, of course. Like just then, no questions, that's good. Well, it's good to have questions, but it means we've actually covered everything that we need to cover. Can't quite see anything yet. And if you take terrain, I'll take weather. So, like we said on the last one, you can manipulate the ethos display to get the weather and terrain. So terrain's a good shout today, with the rock. Yeah. So if it was poor weather conditions, it's good, because you'll see on the when we do get to the landing, you do actually come quite close to it, in my opinion, especially for runway 09. And in addition to that, both ends of the runway are water. So we'll be cautious of that as well. So there can be effects caused by different runway lengths, widths, if you're coming over water. So to do with the brain and your eye and how it perceives that. So for narrow runways, you'll believe you're actually higher than you actually are. So it'll make you perform a lower approach, possibly undershooting the runway. However, we have flight directors, so it doesn't really matter. But if you don't and you're flying raw data, which we actually will be today, raw data again, no flight directors, it can give you the tendency to think you're narrow runway, tendency to think you are higher. So wider runway, have a think what that might be. That's going to make you think you're lower. Gives you possibility of overshooting by overcompensating for that. Also, if you're coming in to Gibraltar at night over water, it can give you like a black hole effect, which is just weird for the vision because you've got nothing but the runway, so it just looks like you're fixated on it. Oh, not long now, 9 miles to go. So approaching 10,000 feet, so if we could do the 10,000 feet checks please. And I'm going to go speed intervene 240 knots. MCP speed. I'm just going to use the speed brake. So there's the aircraft just trimming out for the new speed and the speed brake. Approach checklist.
Approach check.
We'll say we've been cleared down on QNH now as well, so
Altimeters.
1013 set and checked.
1013 set and checked on my license.
Checked.
Approach checklist complete.
5 miles to go. So we'll talk this through as we're doing it, just to make sure everyone's happy with what's happening. There's 1,000 feet to go. VS 1000. Oh, wrong way. Vertical speed. So sterile cockpit now again. Now we're below that 10,000 feet, so we'll not be talking to you about thunderstorms. As we're now commencing the approach, there's PMOS. Next speed will go to 30 knots. I'm going to update the point just so we get some more accurate representation on LNAV. There's out acquire. Take VNAV.
MCP speed VNAV out.
Checked. And we'll start coming down now to 1,500 feet. And down to VNAV speed.
VNAV speed.
Checked. And the profile's coming back in.
Looking good.
And I can see something that looks like Gibraltar.
Yeah, just off the nose on the
Yeah.
license.
So we need to be at about 3,000 feet for bug off and 230-ish knots, which we've got. Next one will be 2,524 feet, 206 knots. Start to get some flaps in then. So we've got 10 miles to go until bug off. Profile's still high, but it's coming back in nicely. We'll be back on profile by then. So that's a really useful tool, just to see where you are in relation to where you want to be, height-wise. And you can see the rock area now. Shame we'll be getting off and we'll still be in Barnsley.
Yeah, sadly.
I'm going to go 220 knots now. Take flap 1 please, Spence.
Flaps 1.
Being off path.
Checked.
That'll just help us capture that profile. Means we can get that descent down now. Vertical speed. And flap 5.
Flap 5.
There you go, it's coming in quite nicely now. Go speed 200. Just use that flap to get that extra bit of drag. Take flap 5 speed. Speed brakes.
2500.
Right outside, QNH1013.
1000 true.
Checked. Go gear down, flap 15.
Gear down. Flap 15.
Out of the choir.
Checked.
That's when it starts to get interesting. And flaps 30.
Flaps 30.
VRF of 140. If we could just do the start switches and speed brake. And landing checklist. MCP speed, VNAV out.
Landing checklist. Engine start switches.
Continuous.
Speed brake.
Up green light.
Landing gear.
Down 3 green.
Flaps.
30 green light.
Landing checklist complete.
Sweet. Right, visual. So we're really monitoring what the aircraft's doing now. As you can see a big rock there. I think we're at Gibraltar.
Still let the cabin crew to see, take the
Checked.
seats.
And we'll say we've been cleared to land.
Cabin crew seats for landing, please.
Then at Gold Bravo 09 Fox, I'm going to go vertical speed, and we'll do it when we get to, yeah, that's it. When we get to, yeah, 09 Foxtrot, and I'll just put about, what are we looking at for, 8, 12, 16, 20, about 750 feet a minute. Go vertical speed. Yeah, I've got it. There we go. We'll put 400 in. Minus 700. Right, so we're configured for landing. Landing check's complete. We're visual.
Visual.
Checked.
1,000 feet.
So when it starts to get interesting. Right, flight director's off. Just manual thrust, manual flight.
$500.
500 feet.
Checked.
Approaching minimums.
$400.
Minimums.
Check, continue.
Minimums.
Continue.
300. $200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Speed brake up.
Check.
Reverses now.
Check.
60 knots.
Checked. Right, we'll take what we said. And after landing procedure. Good fun.
Yeah, it was good though.
Right, we'll just take it onto a stand now. So we vacated left and we brief left again. Quite busy.
Got a US Air Force there.
Yeah. I'm surprised they got that in here. Try and sneak on at the end.
Yeah.
And taxi and turn-offs can come off. We'll just shove it on a self position here somewhere. Right, AP can go on the bus. And shut down checklist.
Shut down checklist. Fuel pumps.
Oh, coming off.
Electrical.
Is set.
Fasten seat belts.
They're coming off when we get the engines gone, so we'll do 2 blues, 1 red, engines dead. Passenger sides off, anti-collisions off.
Window heat.
Off.
Probe heat.
Off.
Anti-ice.
Is off.
Electrical hydraulic pumps.
Staying on.
Voice recorder.
Is off.
Air conditioning packs.
Auto.
Engine bleeds.
On.
APU bleed.
Is coming on.
Exterior lights.
Off.
Start switches.
Off.
Auto brake.
Off.
Speed brake.
Down D10.
Flaps.
Up.
Parking brake.
Set.
Start levers.
Cut off.
Weather radar.
Is off.
And CVR.
Off.
Cockpit door.
Still closed locked.
Shut down checklist complete.
Super. So yeah, that was Lisbon to Gibraltar. Hope you all enjoyed that. It was a very interesting approach.
Very sporty.
Yeah, very sporty into runway 09. So I could imagine with some weather and winds that'd be really interesting to do. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed that. So any other suggestions, feel free to to suggest them. Me and Spencer will love to have a go at doing them. Yeah, don't forget to, if you like the video, which you surely can't not have, to like it, subscribe to the channel, and I believe you can also do the bell icon to notify you when we're going live, and it's the FlyMe Flight Simulator YouTube channel. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed that. It was good fun, and yeah, that's all from us for the moment. We'll go and get a coffee.